Hello, everyone, and this is my review for Impact Wrestling on February 16th, 2017. And, you know, outside of a couple segments of this show, actually, there was a good chunk of decent stuff on this show, but some of the stuff that was in there as well was kind of perplexing and kind of not, I won't say not necessary, but just kind of meh to go along with it. But they started off the show tonight with Decay, and it was Crazy Steve and Rosemary going up against Brandy Rhodes and Moose. And again, this is one of those matches. Like, first of all, it was almost shocking they didn't put Abyss in there to kind of like offset Moose, because it made it feel like, oh, it's Crazy Steve going up against Moose, and it seemed like a big mismatch in there to go along with it. Brandy Rhodes herself, she now granted, I have to give her a little bit of credit on the aspect that they are putting her out there so when she is so new to the wrestling business, but she looks so awkward in the ring. Like, I go from one spot, I do a little chant or something, or I look around, and then it's like, where am I supposed to go for my next spot at that point? And she does come off a little bit awkward in the ring. They have Moose and Brandy go over when they did the Moose jabs into the discus lariat, and like I said, Brandy Rhodes herself looks a little bit awkward in the ring, and they do a backstage promo afterwards where they play off the aspect that Moose and Brandy Rhodes are friends, and it might be, I guess that could be something if they decide to go with a Cody Rhodes thing when he comes back to Impact Wrestling whenever he shows up at, or because I know they did a bunch of tapings. I don't know if he was actually at those tapings or not in any way, but they could play off of something like that if they really wanted to in the end. So we'll see where they go along with all of that. Up next was Eddie Edwards coming out, and I love the aspect that he comes out there and cuts a rather short promo about how Davey Richards betrayed him and everything like that. It's like he didn't even really want to talk about it. He just wanted Davey Richards to come out there so he could beat the crap out of him. Angelina Love is the one that comes out, and eventually she brings out Davey Richards, which, like, when he initially comes out, and she refers to him as the lone American wolf as well, not just the as they were initially known before they were in Impact Wrestling, or when they showed up on NXT a while back. They were initially known as the American Wolves beforehand. So she calls him the lone American Wolf, and basically he comes out there almost in a trance. It felt like he was like his eyes said he was in a full trance mode, wanting to go after Eddie Edwards or whatever it was. Davey Richards does cut a promo, basically playing the jealous game of, he didn't like the aspect that, while he was out with injury, Eddie Edwards garnered like all this attention and got the world title and everything like that. This does eventually lead to a big brawl between them that gets broken up by security, and a street fight was made for later in the show. Not a bad segment. I actually enjoyed this segment. I liked the stuff that they did with Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards. I like the aspect that Angelina Love's playing a part in this as well, to go along with it. It seems like she's the one kind of in the mastermind style role at that point, but we'll see how everything goes off of that. For later shows as well, because it's not the end. It's not the end here. And I was thinking, it's like, they made a street fight so quickly. A street fight is usually a match that ends a feud. Why would they do that so quickly with these two guys? Because you can get a lot of work out of this down the road. But I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Up next was Eddie Kingston, or just Kingston, going up against Jesse Godderz. And Jesse Godderz goes over in this match, and I was initially like, I didn't get to see a good chunk of this match. I was seeing bits and pieces because I was also making dinner at that time, and I could see the TV, like I could see everything going on. I couldn't really hear the commentary and everything in that sense at that time. But Jesse Godderz picking up the victory here just kind of left my head scratching. It's like, wait a minute, why? I mean, you're trying to build the DCC up as like this dominant force and everything in that sense, but he loses clean to Jesse Goddard's, and DCC comes out eventually. They weren't out there for the match, but they come out afterwards and basically just stare down Jesse Goddard's, like pointing fingers or pointing whatever at him. And that one left your head scratching. It's like, wait a minute, aren't they supposed to be building this DCC team up as like a dominant force? But they have one of their guys lose just clean to Jesse Goddard, who really doesn't show up all that often on the show. It kind of left your head scratching on that one. Up next was Tyrus, and he had taken over the Fact of Life stage. And eventually, or as he was talking, he made it feel like that Eli Drake was his actual guest. But the promo between these two, I love the aspect that initially Eli Drake comes out there with like an arm sling on, and then eventually he just says, you know what, screw it. He takes it off. It's like, yeah, the arm's fine. I don't care. The reason why I left you last week is you're doing things without me, or without my permission, because he had basically paid him to be as heavy. But yet the week before is like when they had the whole race for the case briefcase, Tyrus says like, oh, you're gonna face EC3, and then the week after that it's like a 3-on-2 handicap match instead of trying to find another tag partner to go along with it. And Drake cut a good promo on Tyrus, which eventually leads for them to have a match the next week. And he does cut one more promo backstage later on in the show to go along with everything and that aspect of it, where basically he said what he was going to do to Tyrus the next week, and we'll see how everything plays out on that. I actually kind of like this segment. It came off really well with everything. Let's see here. What's up next to talk about? Oh yeah, they had a bunch of segments backstage with what is it? Michael Bennett and Braxton Sutter doing like a bachelor party, and then you had Maria, Sienna, Ali, and Laurel Van Ness doing a bachelorette party, and basically the shenanigans that were going on in there. And these segments were all right. They weren't bad. They were kind of on the aspect of it. They do end it off with what is it? Everybody passed out, or no, not everybody from both parties, but the bachelor party being like everyone's passed out except Braxton Sutter, and then he basically puts Michael Bennett in a compromising position, and then calls his wife and just leaves. It wasn't a bad segment. I thought it came off rather. I thought the segments came off rather well. It does play off of that whole aspect of what will more than likely be the ending of this entire storyline next week with Braxton Sutter, Laurel Van Ness, Maria, Ali, or at least an ending to the aspect that Ali's going to probably be is technically working for Maria, which I thought they would have ended like months ago, like back at Bound for Glory, but it's been like 4 months that they've continued on with it and everything in that sense. Like I feel like this one has been overdue to finish in some way, shape, or form, or at least have a further progression in its storyline. I think we're gonna finally get that next week, and it'll be nice to see where they decide to go with everything. Up next was Brooke going up against Sienna. Brooke won this match. It was kind of a mad match because it didn't feel like they were really working all that well together. Brooke seemed a little bit off, and so did Sienna with everything, or with their style match. It just didn't come off looking all that well between the two of them. Like I said, Brooke goes over in the match. It wasn't a bad match by any stretch of the imagination. It felt rather slow, and it felt like they were looking for their next spot more than anything else, instead of just having a match that flowed. Up next to talk about the Broken Hardys were on their expedition, it's the Expedition of Gold, where they continually get teleported to place to face for tag team titles. They ended up last week in Tijuana, Mexico, and they went on the search for the tag team champions that they were going for. I think it was Crush promotion or something. I don't know if it was a full-on real promotion. I think it was. If so, it was run by Conan as well. And you get a couple of good segments beforehand. It's like, the Hardys show up at the arena. It's like, we need to talk to the promoter. We want a shot at the tag team titles out here. And of course, like, Conan and them were talking. Is like, oh wait, these guys don't want money to work for this. They just want a shot at the tag titles. It's like, okay. Then it's like, okay, we got a good chance at making some money off of this and everything in that sense. And you got some bits with Vanguard 1 in there as well, where they were trying, where it's like he got bored during the match for whatever reason and called in some ladies or something in that sense to try to have a little bit of a party while the Hardys were having their match with Psychosis and Super Crazy. They didn't show too much of the match. I think that was on the aspect of they tried to get as many shots in there without the referee as possible. Because if you didn't hear what happened beforehand, apparently the referee for that particular match also worked for AAA and for Lucha Underground. And they both worked together. And apparently Lucha Underground was, threatening legal issues, so they had to blur out spots with the referee in it to go along with it. And like I said, they didn't show much of the match. They show the Hardys winning. This entire thing was... It was fun for what it was, and it's the aspect of the Hardys getting in and out of an arena without anybody really knowing it, and they don't even really recognize it because they, quote-unquote, have a teleporter. Because after they win the tag team titles, they go back to where Vanguard 1 was, and of course Conan was going to go in there and try to get the tag titles back and everything like that because it doesn't want them to leave with them or anything in that sense. And they get to the tent, or they get to the little room area, and lo and behold, they're gone. They're completely gone. And they show back up at well, I guess they call it, it was back at the Hardy compound, but it was, he also calls it the Dome of Deletion because that's where they did the whole aspect of the total nonstop deletion a few months back. And again, it is what it is. It's kind of like there's pieces of it that's really corny, really hokey. But it's that way in a good way. Honestly, I enjoy it for what it is on that sense of it. And I think they show that next week they're going to Mid-Atlantic to wrestle that team as well. So you're gonna have them doing some more stuff next week in that sense and how they do everything. And we'll see if they show more of the match or something in that sense next week. But I kind of like the way they went about it this week. Up next, you had Lashley come out and he started cutting a promo, basically saying there's now a person who can match up to him. Doesn't matter who you are, what ring you're in, or anything in that sense. And I'm going to hate to say this because I'm not too pronounced with UFC or MMA or anything in that sense. I watch every now and again, but I don't really know the guys or gals in this sense. Outside of like the super major names. Of certain people like a Conor McGregor or Ronda Rousey or now Holly Holm or... in anything in that sense. I don't really know many of the other ones. So the aspect of Josh Barnett coming out, now they do show that he has an impressive record with MMA and everything in that sense. And apparently he was the youngest UFC heavyweight champion to go along with it. And it just came off a little bit weird. In that sense that he would show up in the Impact Zone, he would show up in challenging Lashley, and for a period of time, like when he initially came out, zero reaction at all. There was not much of anything. After he cut his promo a bit, there was a little bit more reaction to it, and he does challenge Lashley to the world title, which of course Lashley ends out accepting. So I don't know when it's going to end up happening, whether it happens next week or the week after. I don't know when, but it was one of those segments that just came off a little bit weird. But then again, I've never really watched this guy. I don't watch a lot of MMA to begin with. That's on me on that one. I don't watch a lot of MMA to begin with, and so I don't end up knowing a lot of those guys in some way. Like I said, they showed off that he had an impressive record of like a lot of wins to very few losses. And they also gave it the aspect that he was like the first, not the first, but the youngest UFC champion that they had ever. So it was what it was, and it'll be interesting to see how he comes off inside of a wrestling ring in the terms of working a wrestling match instead of doing a full-on shoot fight. Unless they do a full-on shoot fight, which might end up being good, honestly, if they did it that way. But it'll be interesting to see how he comes off in a wrestling ring whenever they do have this match. And like I said, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see here, but otherwise, not really much that I can say about that without actually knowing something, which I don't know a lot of that world that Josh Barnett comes from to begin with. So I'm trying not to say that I hated the segment or anything. It came off just a little bit weird because it's something I don't know, something I'm willing to wait and see how everything plays off when they do have a particular match down the road here. So this leads into the main event of the night, which was the Eddie Edwards-Davey Richards street fight. And I'm not going to lie here. This is one of those times, like I said earlier, I was worried about this match because they said it was a street fight. And street fights for like blood feuds are a good way to end feuds. Not begin them, end them. But this street fight was done very well to the point that there's no way that this feud ends in any way, shape, or form. At least not anytime soon. Because, again, Eddie Edwards' wife comes out there. She gets handcuffed to the bottom rope. Angelina Love played a role in there. I like the aspect that it looked like Angelina Love was about to attack Eddie Edwards' wife with a chair, but Eddie Edwards covers her up, and he starts getting beaten down with a chair by Davey Richards, who eventually does a concerto at the end to finish the deal. And there was no actual winner to the match because they took out the referee and everything in that sense. So again, they did it to a point that it doesn't necessarily end the feud, which they did it in a good way too. To that aspect is like, this isn't over between the two of them, in at least not anytime soon. And I thought that was a good way of going with everything. So overall this week, I actually kind of enjoyed this week's Impact Wrestling. There was a couple of segments that kind of just left you as like, but for overall, most of this Impact was rather good to go along with everything, and was rather enjoyable. So we'll see how they continue on with everything next week with Impact Wrestling. And for this week, that is my review for Impact Wrestling. So I thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have a great day.